seen your commercial. Can you tell me what is this strap?
Yeah, for sure. This is, it's called a kirpan. It's a ceremonial blade that Sikhs wear. It's called kirpa on, so it means blessings of honor. And we wear it as a reminder of our duty as Sikhs to defend the rights of others and to defend rights in general. So what you can imagine, especially in the 80s, that brown skin, long hair boy with a funny sounding first name was kind of rough for a kid like me. And kids are pretty rough in Windsor, so they come up and just punch me sometimes. But I was a tough kid too, so I fought back. And what happened as a result of kind of facing that unfairness, I felt that this is unfair that I was being treated this way. But I realized that it generated me this sensitivity to unfairness around me. And I think it was part of the reason why I cared so much about social justice and why I care so much about fighting for equity or fighting for equality or fighting for fairness.
When you're growing up, undoubtedly your parents are saying, Judd, you should be a doctor, a lawyer, which you went on to be a criminal defense lawyer. I'm sure nowhere in their mind they're thinking, you should absolutely go into politics and or run a political party in Canada with the potential of being Prime Minister. When do you take that turn?
Right, and so the funny thing about it is if I went back in time right now and spoke to 10-year-old Jagmeet growing up and I said, hey, in the future you're going to become a politician, I wouldn't believe myself. There'd be no way. I mean, I thought I was going to be successful. I really believed that if I worked really hard, I pushed myself harder than my friends to make sure that I achieved more because I faced a lot of unfairness and negative prejudice. So I thought I have to overachieve to prove my worth. And I knew I would do well, but I just never imagined it would be in a realm where you have to win over the respect and love of others. I thought that's something that's never going to happen. I grew up with so much negativity that I thought there's no way people are going to vote for me or like me. That was just not within my realm of possibility. And so this whole journey, the political journey, is something I had never imagined. I never thought for myself. I'd never seen anyone look like me being elected where I grew up.
I want to ask you about some of these important issues because I think Canadians want to get to know who Jagmeet Singh is. How would you go about building that Canada-US relationship, specifically given that landscape with President Trump?
Well, I think we have to acknowledge that it's going to be difficult. This is a president that is very unpredictable. Many experts have weighed in on his approach to foreign policy, his approach to trade, his approach to anything seems to be mired in a lot of very confusing decisions and a lack of consistency. So it's hard to work with someone like that. We need to be very bold in defending our interests. We need to make sure that we don't back down on issues that are important. But also I think it's important that we call out things that are unfair.
NAFTA is making a lot of headlines now because we went from tweaking to I guess renegotiating now. Should we continue to try and build that Canada-US alliance? I mean, yes, there is a lot of trade, and we've all heard those numbers, that $2 billion a day that's traded north and south. Should we be looking at other countries as well?
Absolutely. I think that we should respect the fact that, yes, we have had historically a strong trading relationship and will continue to have that. But in all good trade deals and all good economic development principles, we need to diversify. If too much of your trade is dependent on one country only, then what we've seen happen, a whimsical decision to impose a tariff can shatter an entire industry. So I think it's important that we diversify, absolutely.
The NDP on the west seems kind of divided on the Trans Mountain pipeline. Where do you stand on that?
The three principles that I put forward, the three values that would inform me on any decision with respect to energy projects. One is that any energy project in our country, whether it's an oil pipeline or any other project, needs to recognize the importance of following through on the principles of UNDRIP, the recognition of the rights of Indigenous peoples. The second principle would be that decisions we make have to be in line with what our climate change goals are. So if we invest in an energy project, does it advance our goals to reduce emissions? And then thirdly, any energy project has to create jobs here in Canada and not just be focused on export, but should also be creating value-added jobs in Canada. I think these are the criteria that we need to look at. So I've put forward that based on these criteria, particularly with respect to UNDRIP, the United Nations Declaration, that Kinder Morgan is not a pipeline that I would support at this time, and nor would I support Energy East. Those two projects fail these criteria very seriously.
How would you address the deficits that the Liberals are currently running?
Given difficult economic times, I absolutely believe that it's appropriate to run a deficit. But what do you run a deficit for? If the deficit's run to actually build publicly owned national infrastructure projects, I think that's a great idea. If the deficit is run to increase spending on education, healthcare, social services, that's something I agree with. If a deficit is run to effectively give money to the private sector through the privatization bank or the infrastructure bank, that to me is not an appropriate use of a deficit. If deficits are run to cut taxes or cut investments made by those who can afford to invest more, that's also not appropriate use of a deficit.
What's the first thing you're going to do if you get elected?
Well, I talked about 4 things, so I'm not sure how I can break it down to one. I want to tackle inequality, climate change, reconciliation, and electoral reform. There's a lot of issues there, so I don't know how I would figure out the best one. I mean, I would love to implement something to tackle inequality right away, and I propose a plan that would lift Canadian seniors out of poverty, working Canadians, as well as Canadians living with disabilities. I'm pretty proud of that plan, and I think that would be something pretty amazing to be able to start.